Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. Thank you for joining us for another special broadcast on Sunday morning. I am joined again by former Navy Commander Bobby Jones, host of Anchor Watch right here on Lincoln Square, who has spent a lot of time in the Middle East. He is our resident national security expert, and here we are. Now we're over 24 hours after Israel and the U.S. have launched a major combat operation in Iran. So we are turning again to Bobby for his expertise as he walks us through some of the latest developments. Bobby, thank you again for being here.
Oh, thanks, Susan. Good morning. Good morning, and thanks for having me. It's been a fast-moving 24 hours of this thing, so let's start breaking it down.
Okay. Well, why don't we go back a little bit? We have footage of the president at his, I guess, war room in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, instead of, at the Resolute desk, addressing all of us as we're used to for presidents. I think we've got a little clip of what he posted on Truth Social in the middle of the night on Saturday, announcing these operations.
Yeah, so let's just take a look at some of these pictures, because a lot of the pictures have come under scrutiny, and of course, the statement that he released. Now, the statement that he released is part of an aspect of warfare that doesn't really get talked about much, but psychological warfare, psyops, etc. Right? And the White House plays amateur hour with this for a few reasons. Looking at this, first of all, he has been desperately trying to recreate the moment that Barack Obama walked down the East Room and talked about killing Osama bin Laden.
Right.
He's
And
been
all
trying
of
to recreate that.
all of the photos that you see where they're all looking so determined that he's trying
Right.
to recreate that famous photo in the
Mhm.
Situation Room with Hillary
During
Clinton
that
and Barack
operation.
Obama and
Yep.
Joe Biden when they found out that, yes, they had gotten Osama bin Laden.
Right, exactly. He has been jealous of that ever since he saw it. So he tried to do it with the Soleimani killing. He tried to do it with all these various people who, don't get me wrong, play something strategic and even tactical in national security, but will never ever top Osama bin Laden, and he hates that. And so the White House tries to put these pictures out, but what it does is the exact opposite for those of us who know what to look for. And it's been, because of social media, been called out by many national security experts, former military, etc. Number one, the fact that he's not in the POC, the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, which is below the White House, shows obviously he did not think it was serious. That picture that you talk about with Obama and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, that was in the POC. That was at the White House because of the seriousness of the operation. Number two, so okay, he's going to fit this operation in during his recovery weekend at Mar-a-Lago where he's going to go golf, et cetera, et cetera. But he looks so haggard. He
Mhm.
looks so beat down. He looks so tired. He looks like someone that is at an assisted living home and people are trying to talk to him, and it
Yeah.
looks terrible. But he
You
thinks
don't
it's
you
strong.
don't want grandpa who's in the
No,
assisted living facility to be
no,
launching a major war in the Middle East.
no. I agree, and so for what they thought they were doing and what is actually happening are two different things.
Mm.
And the other piece of this too, the map in the background, which is, to be honest, an unclassified map to make it look like it's more strategic. Mar-a-Lago is not a skiff, okay? Secure compartmental information facility. It's not. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite based on history. This is where this man stole and stored classified, top secret material that the FBI had to raid to go get back. So it is the exact opposite. You don't know what's there that could compromise any discussions that's being talked there, which is why we have skiffs, right?
Mm.
And because he's down in Mar-a-Lago, he could actually go to U.S. Southern Command. Their headquarters is down there. He could have went there for that to have it more. No, couldn't be inconvenienced with putting thousands of American troops in danger, right?
Right.
Couldn't be inconvenienced. Don't want to ruin his tea times or whatever the heck he's got going on down there. And then his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, everybody's talking about the Apple Watch that she's wearing,
Mhm.
because everybody knows in the military or anybody in federal government that works at high classification levels, you cannot bring certain electronic material with you into areas where you are discussing classified operations. And
Right.
what do we have? We have that. So again, this is not anything being taken serious. This is not serious.
Yeah.
These are not the actions of professionals. Okay.
Right.
And so that's why they're getting dragged on social media. They put something out there to make him look like he was very in command, blah, blah. Instead, he looks weak, feeble, and his security team looks like rank amateurs. And they're getting dragged for it, as they should. Because if I was a commander, active duty, and had those type of things going on, I'm doing an operation, I would be pulled from command. I'd get fired. I'd get fired. So I don't know what else to tell people. This shows me that they're not serious, at least as far as just execution of these tactical maneuvers that we're doing.
So one of the biggest developments since we talked yesterday morning, Bobby, is that it's been announced that the U.S. and Israel were successful in killing Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader, 86 years old. Let's talk about this. Pretty much the universal reaction around the world has been it is a good thing that he's been removed. It is extremely problematic the way that it was done, and there is a lot of uncertainty about what comes next in Iran. What is your take on this?
Well, let me be very clear up front. The fact that he's gone, I will not shed a tear. The amount of thousands of civilians, innocent civilians, his own countrymen, that were killed because of his words will be forever a stain in human history, period. There's no other way around it. But two things can be right at the same time. It's the manner of which this happened, as far as the internal and external apparatuses of both the United States and Israel, and how the world did or did not get any say so in how this went down. And to be honest, how the Iranian people had no real say so in how this went down. So we're seeing this interesting dynamic of celebration and protest around the world. Protest because no one wants to go to war, no more unnecessary wars against what Trump campaigned on, but yet happiness that that regime is over. Now, everything that's happened in the last 24 hours, I've broken down into three major things: saturation, stockpiles, and succession. And this hits on the last one, succession. It's better to deal with the devil you know than the devil you don't. Allegedly, from what we're hearing, the Ayatollah's son is being lined up to be his successor. Younger, and in many ways, people say more vicious. Okay. If he's able to wrestle and be named and wrestle power to be back into that infrastructure, we may be dealing with something worse than we thought initially. That's number one. Number two, the killing of the Ayatollah is significant, but you have to understand their philosophy on dealing with these type of things, death in particular. There was always a succession plan. All of these leaders that have been killed, to include Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, that we now find out he's been gone. He's gone. All of these people knew what their roles were, and to be completely blunt honest, probably suspected they would not live to be that old, that their death would come at some type of evolution of military force, period. They've spoken about it publicly in the past. If you look at some of the things they've said, they already have their people lined up and assuming the roles and responsibilities of the people being wiped out. Here's the thing. And when I say we, the world does not know what those succession plans look like, don't know who the people will be taking place, and what that means strategically long term. Because remember, the United States, the world was able to negotiate a deal in 2016. Okay, with people where there was a certain amount of moderates in the Iranian government that allowed that to happen.
Right.
These actions could very much radicalize the entire country if, depending on who rises to power, and that window may be shut now permanently.
Well,
permanently. And
and especially when you have reports that there were about 150 people killed
mhm,
at a school in southern
yes,
Iran. I mean, that is
yes,
not going to make
no,
the people of Iran feel like the U.S. is a good actor to be trusted.
right, exactly. Now, the reports on whose ordinance it actually was has gone back and forth, but it seems to be more Israeli than American. Irrelevant. These are joint operations. So people are going to see this as one cohesive action. And unbelievably, neither Israel or the United States has spoken specifically to this strike.
Yeah,
Okay. They haven't said whether it was an accident. They haven't said whether, it was being used as a human shield. They have offered no explanation. And as the clock continues to tick before an actual reason is given, you're going to have more people convert from moderate to radical,
yeah,
especially if they are local, especially if they knew those girls, especially if no explanation or condolence even is
right.
given. You know,
Which is unbelievable. And I want to touch on something else, Bobby. So what we get out of the Trump administration a lot is that nobody else has the guts to do what Donald Trump can do. That is why he went after and killed the supreme leader in Iran. That's why he went and kidnapped Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. He is uniquely tough and smart, and we're getting leadership that we've never seen before. Now, in
mhm,
reality, every leader before him has known that the Ayatollah and Nicolas Maduro, these are bad guys. These are
mhm,
guys that, just to speak bluntly, are doing terrible things to their own people.
mhm,
They're autocrats, and these are people who need to be contained.
mhm,
Sometimes the best course of action isn't to kidnap a leader in the middle of the night and instigate a coup. Sometimes the
right.
best course of action isn't to start bombing somewhat indiscriminately, killing over 100 schoolgirls,
Mhm,
and toppling the supreme leader who's been in power in some form for decades. Sometimes that's not the most prudent action, and there's a reason why past presidents haven't done that.
mm. You're absolutely right. And the way that the current administration is trying to tout this is, you know, President Trump's has had the guts to do what other presidents haven't. No, he lacks the intelligence to use this term strategic patience. Nowhere in his vocabulary. Okay. Strategic patience is why the United States won the Cold War without having a nuclear encounter with the Soviet Union. Okay. Strategic patience is what you see exercised many times in business, where they will wait out different competitors, this, that, and other, and instead of trying to compete, wait them out and then eventually acquire them because of
Mhm.
the means that they use. And seeing that Trump is, quote, a businessman, unquote, you would think he'd understand these strategies, but he doesn't, right? And when you are surrounded by people who don't even think in strategic patience terms, they're trying to eliminate whatever enemy they have right here, right now, right here, right now, then you think to yourself, hmm, what do they think is going to happen next month or
Right.
next week or next year, right? And they're not. They're not because the moderate today is going to be the radical tomorrow based on the ordinance dropped in their neighborhood, in their city, which they couldn't have cared less about. But this has happened in Gaza. Okay. Start the
Right.
clock. The amount of radicals that are 16, 17-year-old teenage boys that lost families or were
Hmm.
maimed because of the indiscriminate bombing. This happens, and as we in the West try to, you know, put these labels on people, understand something. Whoever the hero is depends on your vantage point in the story. And they don't see this comprehensively. They see this as something where we're going to be able to do this, do that, do this. The Trump administration has yet to announce what the succession plan is if regime change happens. They just want to change.
Right.
Okay. Israel hadn't done it either. They
Yeah.
have people in mind. They say, okay, that's great. You have people in mind. What about the Iranian people?
Right.
You know.
The Iranian people who Donald Trump, said weeks ago, rise up, we've got your back.
Yep.
But yet there's no plan as far as no promise of what life will be like in Iran, post Ayatollah. And
No, I
oh, go ahead, Bobby.
no, I was gonna say, and here's the thing. I watched the United Nations Emergency Security Council meeting last night, right? And what became abundantly clear to me is the world has no idea what the steps forward are.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
extremely troubling. I wanted to talk to you about the reactions from world leaders. I mean, by and large, our allies in Europe have said that they, support what we're doing. Canada as well.
Mhm,
Obviously, the reaction from China and Russia was condemnation, as they've been
mhm.
longtime allies of Iran. What does this mean in terms of these fragile relationships that we have with our allies abroad? And
Mhm.
what kind of uh, uh, is there any real leadership emerging about what we do now to pick up the pieces of what Israel and what we are doing?
I think that had we had maintained our traditional strong relationships with our allies previous to Donald Trump coming back into office, we would be able to absorb this, and you'd see a more um, ferocious backing on the actions of the United States and Israel. You would, but because, like Taffy, this man has continued to strain the relationship and strain the relationships. Now, when he needs his allies to speak up, they're kind of tepid to the point where Lindsey Graham calls them out and
Mm.
says, "Hey, you guys don't care about this like you care about Ukraine." You're damn right they don't. You're damn right you don't. You personally tried to eradicate NATO, and now you want them to be like, "Yeah, good job, Donald Trump." It's insane.
Mhm.
And looking at this clip here, you know, understand something. The fact that you took out the Ayatollah is going to really go put the IRG, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, into overdrive because
Mhm.
they realize that their leader is gone, stability is in question, and the only thing they know how to do is to respond with overwhelming force on their people. So they're going to do this is a twofold operation. They have to sustain power
Mhm.
internally, and then they are going to go for pride to save face to show that they still have international legitimacy after
Mhm.
the United States and Israel in ways we probably have not seen in a generation. And that should scare everybody because they have those plans and people don't realize that.
Yes, and we have a map of where Iran has struck back so far within the Middle East,
Hmm.
and I feel like there there was a little sense of security that was shattered with
Very much so.
the attacks that we saw in Dubai, for instance, a center of commerce.
Yes.
Dubai and Abu Dhabi have been known as, international cities, playgrounds for the rich, and yet that sense of security was shattered yesterday. And this is just within the first 24 hours.
Hmm.
And these are centers of commerce. We also have the Straits of Hormuz that are closed, which could have catastrophic
Hmm.
economic impacts, obviously with oil prices, but beyond. Can you talk a little bit about that, Bobby? Because, the
Yeah.
financial markets are not open right now. They're opening tomorrow morning.
Yes. Can we go back to that map? And I'm going to explain some things. So number one, my history is I literally would deploy specifically to UAE, to Qatar, and to Bahrain, those big three, on a regular basis. If you look when people hear the Straits of Hormuz, that little crook right there at the top over there is the Straits of Hormuz. 25% of the world's oil production goes through that strait. Okay. Now, the reason everybody's talking about the financial cost is twofold. It used to be most people just worried about the oil being able to go through that strait, right? But then Dubai, in particularly in the UAE, has exploded as a financial center. It's one of the big 4 or 5 financial centers in the world now. And because it continuously got bombed yesterday, And you're right, it is a rich person's playground. It is a paradise. You really cannot believe what they have done and established that as a financial center. But places that I have seen personally, that I've, restaurants that I've eaten at and stuff like that, seeing them in the picture of things blowing up, I'm like, holy, and I don't think people understand. In Dubai, they're so affluent and so wealthy, their police force drives Lamborghinis. Okay. I'm being 100% real. Google it. They drive Lamborghinis. This is
Wow.
something they completely did not expect. As a matter of fact, Bahrain and the UAE in particular believed by aligning themselves with the United States, it was going to provide a layer of security where the things that happened yesterday would never happen.
Mm.
Okay. So, and externally, they're saying, the right things. They're condemning Iran. They blame Iran. But you better damn well believe internally, they are like, we take on a risk by hosting American forces here. And every country that got hit in the first 24 hours have embedded U.S. forces there. So now Iran is basically saying, okay, if you want to house the great Satan, here comes the retribution.
Right.
And to watch some of the systems that are supposed to protect those countries fail or get overwhelmed, which leads to one of my 3 points: saturation. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, Iran is using their medium interballistic missile, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Well, they don't really have those, but medium range ballistic missiles, right? And the problem with this is they have them in mass numbers, and they are overwhelming if they are used consistently. We only have, the United States and our allies only have a certain amount of what we call interceptors to knock those things down.
Right.
So they're doing what's called a saturation doctrine, where they're going to keep shooting. And percentage wise, something's going to leak through and hit, which is what they want. So when you see these hits in Dubai, when you see these hits in Qatar, you can see all the videos of all these things flying and hitting stuff, but things are getting through,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what's shocking people. Well, it's much harder to knock these things down instead of taking out what we call the Archer, which is what the United States and Israel are desperately trying to do today. They're trying to go after those sites where those missiles are launched, so they're not launched, so Dubai, Qatar, Jordan, Saudi Arabia are not hit. But it's the sheer volume of number. And again, this is why the chairman of the Joint Chiefs warned the president against this, because you're not going to have 100%, which is why he's telling people, be prepared for American casualties.
And we've seen that there have been ripple effects beyond. In Pakistan. There were violent clashes between protesters and security forces in Karachi. 9 people were killed after demonstrators tried to storm the U.S. consulate there. Bobby, do you expect to see possibly more instances like this?
I do. I think any American that lives abroad is in danger. And when I say abroad, I mean anywhere in the world, because again, we're talking about a country in which, hey, even the GOP and Trump have admitted, the largest single sponsor of terrorism in the world. So we're talking the Philippines, we're talking, the Middle East, we're talking the United States, we're talking South America, we're talking about all of these various areas of the world where they have cells. And like I said yesterday, this is not an ethnicity thing. It is an ideological thing where people who believe in what the Ayatollah believe and that lifestyle are down for the cause. And they may look like you and me, Susan. That's the reality. And so I don't know how you get people to look out for ideology, but this is what's going to happen.
If you're just joining us, I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. I'm joined by Bobby Jones, who is a former Navy commander, host of Anchor Watch here on Lincoln Square. He has spent years stationed down in the Middle East and knows the region intimately. He's been in charge of forces down there, and that's why we're turning to him as we have this unfolding war with Iran. Bobby, yesterday we talked about the fact that for us in the U.S., other than 9/11, we have been incredibly privileged to not have anything resembling a war come on our shores. But to your point, there are, activists, sleeper cells across the world connected
Mhm.
to Iran. And now we have a situation where this is not just a limited bombing campaign like we saw in June of last year. The president is calling this a major combat operation. He has warned us that American troops will likely be killed. Let's talk about the risks to us here at home, not just abroad. Could we be seeing terrorist attacks hit us right here on the mainland?
Uh, Not to be a fearmonger, but I think it's naive not to think that that's possible. And here's a couple of reasons why. Number one, just the sheer weight of the events and just the normal sleeper cell model that Iran has had for decades. That exists, right? And then post 9/11, it really ramped up, etc. But understand domestic security, who is the current head of the FBI? The guy that we saw getting drunk off his ass with the men's hockey team in Milan.
Right.
That's the guy, ladies and gentlemen. That's
Cash
the guy,
Patel.
Cash Patel, who is supposed to be leading the internal defense against those things at the FBI. A man who has no business in the role, a man who is not serious in the role. And to be quite honest, there, in my humble opinion, to be the scapegoat when something goes sideways.
Mm.
And that's fine and dandy. But here's the thing, we are going to suffer because of it. The fact, I'll give you a perfect example. Because people will be like, oh, well, you're exaggerating. I'm like, no. Since Cash Patel has come in office, okay, we haven't heard one peep about white supremacy in the United States, even though we have FBI reporting previous to direct ties to white supremacy, January 6th, and other crimes around the country. Matter of fact, independent people who've looked at this and said it's probably the number one domestic threat the United States has.
Absolutely.
The rise of that movement.
Okay? And
Okay?
that was established in a Department of Homeland Security report during the Obama administration.
Yes. Not one peep of it since he's come in, because they are not looking at the office as an office of functionality. They look at it from a political standpoint, period. Well, I hate to break it to you, but when you're dealing with real national security issues with international terrorist cells that are coming into your country, I don't know about you, Susan, I want a professional, not a lackey.
Absolutely. And
that's who's in charge.
Right. And let's talk about Trump's DNI, Tulsi Gabbard,
that was my next step.
Former Democratic Congresswoman, ran for president in 2020. One of her big agenda items was no war with Iran. And she was posing herself as an anti-war candidate against the warmongers in the Democratic Party. Now, the last we saw of her, she was actually conducting a raid right near you, Bobby, in Fulton County, Georgia, to get their election ballots from that 2020 election that Donald Trump lost. But she is advising the president during a massive war on Iran. Bobby, you got to help us get our head around this, because this is just mind-blowing to me.
Not only mind-blowing is an understatement. Not only was she that person, the pictures that the White House released yesterday, specifically where J.D. Vance was at the PIAC in D.C., at Washington, D.C., she's in the room with him. And I'm sitting there like, wait, what? First of all, she should have been down in Mar-a-Lago with the president. Shows you where she stands in this whole hierarchy. It was Rubio down there with them, but not
Susie
her.
Wiles,
and Susie Wiles, right. Here's the thing. She has been sidelined, which, okay, fine. If that's what you want to do, your staff, your prerogative. However, when the director of national intelligence is sidelined for Operation Midnight Hammer, when they struck with the stealth bombers and bragged about that, and now with this Operation Epic Fury, whatever, some B-list Hollywood screenwriter coming up with these names, when you have people who are supposed to be the subject matter experts sidelined, and you're making literally life, death, and historical decisions, that says a lot. That says a hell of a lot, right? And so I don't feel like I'm going to give Tulsi Gabbard the benefit of a doubt just for a second and say she really cares about her job. She really knows what she's doing. If that is the case and they're not listening to her, that's even worse because now we're making ill-informed decisions. And if you are any type of commanding officer at the lowest level, all the way to the president of the United States, and you go out of your way to remove subject matter expertise and most importantly, facts and logic-based thinking, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And that is why, even though the first 24 hours of this, everybody's like, oh, okay, this is going well. No casualty in the United States. It's not the first 24 to 48 hours. It's the next 3 weeks that you need to start thinking about and what's going to happen there. That's the thing. And she is supposed to give him an assessment of that. And she's literally not next to him.
So, Bobby, walk us through, what are you expecting to see in the next 24, 48 hours, the next 3 weeks?
I think what we'll see, number one, is immediately you'll see Iran do what I call shotgun saturation. They're going to just try to hit every U.S. and Israeli target that's within their range with as many of their cheaper weapons as they can. When I mean cheaper, I mean, the short range ballistic missiles that aren't really that hard to knock down, some suicide drones, etc. They're going to continue to do that because they're trying to win the PSYOP. They want Dubai to feel like, oh my gosh, and Abu Dhabi and all of this. So number one, they're going to be doing that to buy time, to settle down their succession plan, to put the new leaders in place that have been wiped out. Because they understand this is not just a battle of survival for the regime, but sustainability moving forward if they're trying to remain in power. When you look at those locations that have been targeted, very easily within the range of all of Iran's missile inventory, right? But the other thing about this too is the intimidation factor that Iran relies on when dealing with their neighboring nations. They have always been considered the big dog because they have been basically projecting that they're not afraid to go after anybody, right? And so what you're also going to see is, how does the United States, this is to me a very, very pivotal question, reassure the allies that are getting bombed right now on behalf of the United States to hold on and continue to back the United States and Israel on this? Because understand, when you bring in Israel, there's a complexity with those the Muslim nations there. So we're relying on the United States' individual relationships with those nations. So, for example, I'm not worried about Kuwait because of our history with Kuwait, right? But you better believe UAE, who actually has a trade deal with Israel, is sitting there looking around like, bruh, we were the ones to step from behind all this and get hammered by Iran diplomatically for it. Where's the protection? These are the things where you need professional diplomats, not a real estate developer and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to negotiate. You need actual people to reassure the alliances that we have there. And that's what I'm going to look to see. How does that go in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks moving forward? Militarily, I think things will continue to go the way they're going unless, and here's the big unless a United States asset gets hit, then there's actual casualties, like massive casualties, like God forbid one of the ships in the Gulf gets hit. That will change the tenor of everything, which is why Trump has warned via Truth Social this morning, if you do this, you will see something, a retaliation never before seen, like we don't know what World War II was. But anyway,
right.
But that's why he's saying it, because he understands the calculus, the American people's tolerance for this will go out the window, because it's already going out the window when you look at social media and everything. But it's going to go out the window if American lives are lost.
Bobby, we've been hearing about the airstrikes, but I've been searching and I have seen very little coverage about what is being done at sea, what the role of the Navy is, and that is, that is your area of expertise. You served for a couple of decades. What is going on there that you can see, and what can we expect?
So the two things that I would say that's happening with sea is the number one, the establishment of air superiority. So who owns the airspace over the Persian Gulf and then going what we call feet dry into Iran. Who controls that? That is what's allowing Tomahawk missiles to fly. That's what's allowing sorties, meaning, manned aircraft to fly and target, blah, blah. That establishment is key. It's very key. And you could tell that the United States understood that with Israel because they went and they immediately, took out air search radars, air defense radars of Iran. Bandar Abbas, a place I know very well. I can go down the list of the places where they took these things out. That was number one, to establish air superiority, because when you can do that, now not only can you create strikes, not only can you control logistics, right, but you can really choke off a modern day country when you control their airspace. So that's number one. Number two, the Straits of Hormuz, the Straits. Again, as I've said, very key. Now, the nuclear option for Iran is to mine the Straits. Just indiscriminately drop mines where ships cannot go through there. We've seen insurance companies here in the last 24 hours that insure big, huge vessels that bring oil and all those type of things to the rest of the world. Their rates are going up. As a matter of fact, there was a temporary pause on traffic through there that freaked everybody out. Now, supposedly, it's being allowed. The Iranians are being benevolent and allowing the transit through there, but that could change as desperate as the regime becomes, right? So that is the other major piece of this. And then finally, ports, as simple as it sounds, being able to access and get into ports in the Straits and the BAM. So on the other side of that, the peninsula with Saudi Arabia and where Yemen is, the Bab el-Mandeb, we call it the BAM for short, where the Red Sea is, access into there, access to the ports that basically, after you go through the Suez Canal, that you have access to. These are major strategic choke points. And if you know anything about that area, the BAM in particular, the Houthis, who are pissed as hell about what happened here in the last 24, 48 hours, they have shot at multiple U.S. ships in the past 6-7 years, and the United States has knocked them down. Now they could target civilian merchants because they don't give a damn, because they're mad that the supreme leader was killed in Iran. So these are things to look for. How does the Straits of Hormuz play out? How does the BAM play out? And then the air superiority over the sea going into land. Those are the three major things I would look for moving forward.
Bobby, can you talk with us briefly about the Houthis, who they are, what their agenda is?
So yeah, yesterday I talked about basically the franchising of terrorist cells. Long story short, and I mean extremely long story. Let me just try to break it down this way. They are a faction of fighters that believe in a certain version of Islam and that is backed by Iran, but it's hated by Saudi Arabia in particular. So they have been in this conflict with Saudi Arabia for years. They hate the United States because Saudi Arabia and the United States are allies. Saudi Arabia also is where Mecca is. And so they look at the fact that the United States is even allowed to be there as, standing on sacred land, infiltrating, etc. So they hate us. They hate the Saudis. The Saudis and them have been bombing each other back and forth. We have helped them. They have been pirates where they have hijacked ships, and they have just flat out tried to attack and eradicate U.S. Navy and other U.S. allied shipping. So because of that strategic choke point, it's easier to go after ships when they go through that. And that's kind of what they've targeted. Now, we have had many strikes against them and try to support those in Yemen who go against them. But they are resilient. They are resilient as hell. And part of the reason they have been resilient as hell is because, Iran has historically supported them. They are on board, on the page, and now, you're getting these alerts. I'm seeing them as they pop as I talk to you, specifically about shipping. MSC, the world's largest shipping container company, is basically telling everybody to shelter in place, don't go anywhere, doing this. The largest shipping company in the world is basically reducing its operations because of what's happening. This is going to affect you because chances are the clothes on your back came off of one of those type of container ships from MSC. So there's ripple effects that Trump hadn't even talked about. His administration hadn't even addressed with all of these various things that are being brought to the forefront. And there is no designated plan for it.
So we've talked about the fact that the Trump administration's approach to foreign policy has been, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yep.
It's just
Yep.
been, doing Operation Epic Hammer and Fury and all of these things to project this muscular military response. At the same time, we have done irreparable damage to our soft power around the world. One of the first actions of the Trump administration was to kill USAID, which will result, as we know, in probably tens of millions of deaths, within the next decade. But more than that, there's the Voice of America, our media. They killed the VOA in Iran, in Farsi, where we can communicate with people, with the people in Iran who would like to have a different government, who would like to rise up and be free, but we've cut that very important tool off. Bobby, talk with us about this, because this is a part of the story that I think could be extremely damaging about what comes next in Iran.
So I'm glad you brought this up. A couple of things. I got to know USAID very well because I was a peacekeeper for the United Nations for a year. And at that time, only less than 30 peacekeepers could be American at one time all around the world, hundreds of thousands. So I was one of that very, very select few. And I got to really see what USAID does and literally how many people were depending on them to live. Not nice to have, to actually survive. It was the most effective soft power apparatus the United States had. Full stop. You can't convince me otherwise. Not the Peace Corps, not the USAID. That's number one. Okay. We neuter ourselves in that sphere because soft power is being confused with being weak, which is insane. But let me give you some historical context. 1945. Late August, the United States wins the war in Japan, right? MacArthur has a decision to make. Does he dispose the emperor? Okay. Does he kick him to the curb to establish a full-fledged democracy? All right. Understand, right when the war ended, the only time the Japanese people heard the voice of the emperor was when he was talking about they were surrendering. He made the strategic decision, and believe me, MacArthur had his flaws, but he understood this. He kept the emperor in the chair to be able to effectively communicate with the people of Japan the next steps moving forward, how they were going to rebuild the country. And it turned out Japan is now, if not one of our top 2 closest allies, top 5, right? Because he had a trusted voice that he could use to relay to the people what was happening in these uncertain times. When you mention Voice of America, that is historically what the role of that organization has been. To communicate to the masses, hey, we are here to help, this, that, and the other. We totally gutted that budget, got rid of those people. And now the legitimate question is, well, how are we going to tell the Iranians what America's trying to do? Everybody's giving you the Scooby-Doo because you don't have it, because you self-neutered it. And now you cannot communicate properly where people will not misconstrue your intent. And that matters. You don't even have the right people who can speak the language and have the subject matter expertise to understand the culture to go on the radio or go on any type of mass media to do it, because you killed the program.
If you're just joining us, I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. I'm joined by Bobby Jones, who is a retired Navy commander, host of Anchor Watch right here in Lincoln Square. Bobby has spent years in the Middle East commanding troops, and he has been so generous with his time over the weekend to tell us exactly, what is going on, what we know, what we don't know about this major combat operation that the U.S. and Israel has embarked on in Iran. Bobby, we've spent a lot of time talking about the military aspects, the national security aspects, geopolitics. I do want to, before we let you go, talk a little bit about domestic politics, because as we know, our president, President Trump,
Mhm.
is all about the politics. He is all about the perception. And we know that his poll numbers have been uh, at record lows. Usually, presidents expect that if you're going to embark on a major military campaign, that you'll see your
Mhm.
poll numbers rise, and that certainly has to be a factor in his mind. Uh,
Mhm.
let's talk about that. Do you think that he will get a bump for this? Um, let's also talk about the optics a little bit about him launching this war from
Mhm.
Mar-a-Lago,
Mhm.
releasing those photos of him in the USA cap. How
Mhm.
do you think he's coming off in all of this?
I think he's going to be disappointed in the reaction. If there is a bump, it's going to be minimal. It really will. Here's why: because he has failed to act presidential in the execution of this war. Let's once again use history as our reference point. FDR's famous speech after Pearl Harbor, George W. Bush's speech after 9/11. They were put and done in scenarios and scenes that conveyed the gravity of the moment. FDR addressing a joint session of Congress, and I don't know, asking for a declaration of war. You know, Bush in the Oval Office, not at the Texas White House. Okay, he was in the Oval Office, had a very stern tone, and explained, "This is why we're doing this. This
Mm-hmm.
is where we're going." Okay, you got a guy that stood up in front of stood up in front of basically a high school stage at Mar-a-Lago with a couple of flags up there with his hat over his head. His hat's over his head because he wasn't ready for TV. There was no
Right.
bronzer. you
Right.
know Gravity looked like it is whipping his ass, as he's dragging. You can literally see it. And so then the White House puts out those propaganda pictures, which we've talked about earlier. The perception of the public is going to be, what the hell? Looks like someone set that up in their garage or their attic, right?
Absolutely.
There's no professionalism here. There's no seriousness here. Like I said, you could have went to Southcom, where
Mm-hmm.
they have a full facility for use by the president if necessary. Chose not to. So what it looks like is some half-assedness, right? And to me, to be completely honest, the only things that could happen here are mostly negative. Even if you remove the regime, you can't tell me who's going back in place. This is a lose proposition for the United States. It may be a win for Israel, but it could be a lose domestically for the United States and President Trump's administration. Period.
Bobby, we all know that Donald Trump campaigned on this idea that
Yes.
he would not start any new wars. I think we have the Wall Street Journal opinion from his vice president, J.D. Vance. The best thing he ever did was
Mm-hmm.
not start any wars.
Yes.
Since he's been in office, I mean, this is what his eighth strike, his eighth
Yes.
military operation, and he has only been back in office for a little over a year. Do you expect that there will be some sort of a schism within MAGA, within the Republican Party, because there is a very strong contingent there that does not want to see any more foreign wars. We saw the quagmire in Afghanistan. We saw the Iraq War drag on, and there has been a growing isolationist streak in the Republican Party.
The schism's already here. I mean, obviously Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, these are the ones that are the most vocal. Now, of course, they've been disowned allegedly by the Republican Party because,
They
and
still
Marjorie
wanted
Taylor Greene.
transparency for the Epstein files,
Well,
which
and there it is, and there it is. Don't get me wrong, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's in my state. She's the district right next door to me.
Mhm.
I get it, but I will give her credit on this. She is standing on business on the stuff that she wants to stand on business on. Okay.
Mhm.
Massey from day one has been that guy, and they're trying to drag him. But here's what I find very interesting. The rest of the GOP right now is either claiming ignorance. Like, do we have the Coburn
Oh,
clip.
John Cornyn. Yeah,
Oh, John
let's
Cornyn,
get
rather.
that.
Yeah, I was just like,
He's the Texas senator. I think we have a clip of him where he's just as confused as the rest of us about
and I'm
what just went down in Iran.
and mind you,
I don't
he's
know
a pretty senior.
I'm learning as like you are as the news unfolds exactly what's happening. But I do know Iran must be stopped from a nuclear weapons program.
This man is claiming ignorance, and he's a senior member of the United States Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Scott on TV trying to act like this and look, they are plastic, man, trying to weave how they don't want to tick off dear leader, but they know their constituents are going to be like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing? And they don't have an answer. And this is the fascination of, the mindset of, I didn't know the leopard would eat my face is what's been trending a lot. The fascination that the MAGA crowd, the two major things that they built their pillar on outside of all the other, culture war stuff was, number one, Epstein files. Number two, no new wars. This man has gone out of his way to obstruct on the Epstein files, and he has gone out of his way to put military in harm's way and starting new wars, new possible forever wars, because we don't know how this is going to play out. Hell, we're not talking about Venezuela right now because of Iraq, but
right.
I still don't know what's going on down there, right? So these are the type of things that he promised that he was smarter than other previous presidents, the other 45 men before him that held the position. But yet here we are. You can't tell me what Iraq's going to look like in a month.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't tell me what's going to look like next week.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Iran. Well, Iraq too now, think about it. I mean, there's a ripple effect here that entire region is going to go through. And people are not really asking the hard questions. This is where if the media was truly independent, they would be hammering him on details. What is the succession plan? Who's supposed to run Iran if this regime change happens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not being asked.
Let me ask you a question, Bobby. This same political media hammered President Barack Obama for wearing a tan suit in the Oval Office. And yet I haven't heard a peep of them saying, hey, maybe it's not secure for the president to launch a war from Mar-a-Lago.
Right. I agree, because this has never been about the qualifications of President Barack Obama. This has been about the lack of accountability of President Trump and the people he represents. So what you do is you try to tear down legitimacy to raise mediocrity up to excellence. And that's what's happening. We have someone who his entire life has never been held accountable for anything. Right. And there's an aspect of American society that appreciates that. The problem with that is American society is no longer isolated from international responsibility. And what happens is what happens in the United States affects the entire world. And we are seeing the world suffer because of us, the United States, and our lack of accountability standards for the privileged class.
Yes,
Trump represents that.
It is striking to see the difference around the world to people who have been implicated in the Epstein files versus Prince Andrew, a member of the royal family, has been arrested. His ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, it looks like her arrest is imminent as well. We've seen major figures across Europe who have been arrested. In the United States, we've seen some resignations in the private sector. We've seen no accountability for anyone within the government, certainly no accountability for the president. And that kind of message to the world, I think, is extremely damaging, Bobby, because we have been the lone superpower. We have tried to position ourselves as a moral actor in the world before Donald Trump, at least. Now, the fact that we will let anyone get away with horrific financial and sexual crimes against children, as long as they have some connection to our president. I mean, I feel like not only is that an incredible moment for us as Americans, but that alone hurts our statue in the world.
Yeah, it does. And when you even factor in, and we had Liz Oyer on Anchor Watch last week, the fact that pardons are basically for sale,
Right.
right?
And Liz Oyer was fired by the Trump
Yes.
administration. She was the pardon attorney, and
Mhm.
said no to giving Mel Gibson his guns back. And they said, and Todd Blanche, who now is cavorting with Ghislaine Maxwell and maybe greasing the skids for clemency or pardon for her,
Mhm.
he showed
Mhm.
Liz Oyer the door because she actually had principles.
Right. She's still on business. And again, to watch let me put it this way. When the country, the United States, rebelled against to formulate itself as a nation, when the King Charles, strips his brother of his royal title and all privileges thereof, and we, on the other hand, move Ghislaine Maxwell to Club Fed, right?
Yeah.
Even though that's against every law and regulation that we have,
Right.
it shows you how far we have fallen, right?
Yeah.
There is no Prince Andrew. It's Andrew Mountbatten Windsor or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
And the thing is, that is so significant in their society. We have no equivalent to that with the Epstein files, when we all have seen evidence where there should be people locked up, period. And what closest we're getting are depositions, statements, but no pursuing.
Right.
And there's no way that the Republican portion of Congress can move forward and try to enforce any laws and regulation on anybody moving forward after this. They've lost all credibility. They've lost all credibility. And part of this is because they have members in their caucus that probably have done similar things. Jim Jordan, I'm specifically calling you out, right? And so there are these aspects of this where the accountability of lack thereof, internally, domestically in the United States, is now being reflected externally, internationally, and the world is worse off for it. And we have no one to blame but ourselves as Americans.
The last thing I want to ask you about, Bobby, is we've seen that the Trump administration, it seems like their top priority is how they can sell whatever they're doing on social media. There's been some very disturbing reporting in the Wall Street Journal and other outlets about how Kash Patel runs the FBI. What his first priority was after Charlie Kirk was killed. It's, what am I going to tweet about this? Not what is my role as the director of the FBI in trying to solve a crime. And so, we see so much emphasis on these names, Operation Epic Fury, and putting out the propaganda photos. We've seen some great reporting from Wired about in the first 24 hours after the strike on Iran, that X in particular was just awash with propaganda. We've seen this before, the video footage that people post that's from prior attacks, even video game footage. But it does seem that we have reached a point where under Elon Musk, who of course was part of the Trump administration, he was the guy spearheading Doge, killing USAID, trying to kill various programs in the government. We've just seen that it has become an absolute cesspool of misinformation. What do we do, Bobby, when a lot of Americans aren't even getting the actual news out there? They're getting just a flood of bullshit.
It is very hard. It is very hard. And you're absolutely right. On X, heck, they have AI video now that they're trying to pass off as actual real content. I think when we look back on this period 10, 15 years from now, you're going to see this is the era of the rise of the independent journalist. We've kind of teetered along that line in social media, but independent organizations like here at Lincoln Square, I can think of a few like Midas Touch and the Bulwark, all these different organizations that do not have the traditional billionaire ownership corporate ties are going to be the salvation. Because when you think about it, think about the stories that have broken here. They are detached from the classic news network, CBS, Fox, CNN. It's like, Daily Beast. It's like it's y'all, it's Midas. We are digging way more and applying journalistic standards. I think that's where people are going to get most of their information. And to be completely honest, if you watch something like Lincoln Square and then you turn on CBS now, you see it's almost like you're talking about two different things. However, this is where I think the American people are starting to realize something. The thread about how the economy is performing, you turn on CBS, you turn on Fox, like, oh, it's great, 50,000 Dow. And then you turn on us, and we have actual economists who study this and tell you this is not happening. This was happening. And then you go to the store and you see how much it cost. My light bill is through the roof this month. I'm like, what in the world? You see it. Who do you tend to believe? You have your eyes. You have two competing narratives. The ones that aren't being bankrolled by the same people who were at the inauguration for Trump are telling you the truth. And that is what's happening. It's not a coincidence that this platform, Lincoln Square is growing, that Midas Touch is growing. These we're talking now millions of views compared to traditional media, which is losing viewership. That is not normal. And so that is the salvation, which is why they're trying to figure out a way to go after, things on YouTube and this, that, and the other, because they realize it's killing their narrative. So that's what I recommend people do. People, especially journalists, people who were with these networks and were forced out or left because they tried to tell the truth, I would recommend listening to them. I recommend listening to people we bring on who have been in the jobs. You see what I'm saying? Who have been in the rooms of decision-making and policy and now are sharing that expertise. That's who you go to. Don't go to the clowns that are talking heads. Like using Stephen Miller's example, what the hell has he ever done? But yet he's got a comment on everything. Come on. So yeah, and mind you, the journalists in these major organizations now, to me, are brands. They want to make money. They want to write their book. But in essence, they're life tourists. They're not subject matter experts. They go from the thing that's hot and move to the next thing. They're life tourists. Go find the subject matter expertise that's talking about what you need to know about.
Well, Bobby, that is why we have you on today and why we kept you on for so long yesterday on Lincoln Square, because we don't need to just hear from a bunch of pundits. We need to hear from someone who's been in the arena, who understands the region, who has been stationed there. And that's why your expertise is invaluable. I appreciate all of you tuning in early on a Sunday morning to get an update on what exactly is going on in Iran and the Middle East. I will say, if you are new here, please think about subscribing to Lincoln Square. You can do so for free. You can subscribe to Bobby as well on Substack. And he hosts Anchor Watch on Tuesday. Please tune in for that. He will be back with the latest on what is going on with the operation in Iran and so much more. Bobby, thank you. Thank you,
Susan. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for spending your Sunday morning with us.